Hey, welcome to 11:11 this morning. Welcome to this is Mother's Day, and while we're not, as I mentioned in my blast and blog, if you read that it's a difficult time, so we acknowledge the reality that Mother's Day is a difficult time for a lot of folks for a number of different reasons. It's also a time to be celebrating, so if you're celebrating, then happy Mother's Day. If it's a difficult time, know that we're also mindful of that reality as well. And Kagan's up here too. Come on over here. So I'm glad that you're with us this morning, and I appreciate it. I don't know who brought the flowers. These are nice. Is it anonymous? Okay. Oh, Mary Ellen brought the flowers. Thank you, Mary Ellen. Yeah. So it's good to have you all here. It's good to have you online watching as well. I'm Tom McDermott, the pastor of this community, and so glad to have you online watching. While you're online, make sure you register. There's a place for you to click the link and register. There's a place you can click the link on the phone in here. If you scanned the bulletin, that's where they are. You can get it on your phone. We may go back to paper bulletins at some point in the near future, but right now we're scanning them. So you can also find links at the bottom of that bulletin online or on your phone. And you can find a link where you can click that, and you can subscribe to the e-blast that I send out every week in case you're not getting that. So do that as well. And you can also find a link there for UMCOR, the United Methodist Committee on Relief, for direct help and aid to Ukraine, and as well as to other ministries that they're involved in. But right now, they're very much active boots on the ground there and in refugee areas around there. So that's a good place for you to connect with that. Listen, a couple of things are coming up. While you're doing all of that, I'm going to make a couple of announcements. First of all, this coming Tuesday, Kagan and I, and eventually Marianne Blue in San Antonio, who's been hosting one of our Tuesday night conversations groups, that we're going to have a series that's going to deal with allyship for about 4 or 5 weeks. Tuesday evenings, online, Zoom gathering, and it'll be from 7 to 8 o'clock, just about an hour. And so I asked Kagan to kind of just give us a quick kind of highlight of exactly what is allyship. Why do we need it?
Yeah. Hello. Good morning, everyone. I love that. Thank you. So this series on allyship is basically, the intention behind it is to allow us to relate to one another better. The first episode or kind of series that we're going to be doing on starting this Tuesday is how to be an ally in your interpersonal relationships. So kind of redefining the word ally, because I feel like we think about it in a political sense, but it's very interpersonal. So interpersonal allyship is basically going to be talking about how we can show up for one another in our relationships, how to show up for those around us that need that kind of support, how to allow them the space to be seen, and then how to kind of see it on the opposite way, because we all need allies. So how to be able to tell when someone is genuinely on your side, how to be able to tell when someone is genuinely standing with you in your struggles, and how to identify that, thank them, and hold that space for them as well. So
yeah, and I think a lot of us were involved during COVID. We were involved in book groups and reading groups and such, and conversation groups. This is kind of a next step, really, it feels like. I think, a number of us sort of had our eyes open to a lot of things, but for me, it's like, what is really the next step? And how does allyship, because we're going to get difficult.
Yeah, it's going to get sticky.
We're going to figure out how to craft conversation around difficult aspects of that.
Right.
So I don't want you to feel like we're just talking about, here's some steps you can take, because we meet people every day that we have disagreements with, and how do we engage with one another in ways that do embrace something larger than those differences. So allyship moves just not simply in terms of advocacy, but like you're talking about a wider advocacy.
Right.
That really is the beloved kingdom.
Right, and like you were talking about, a lot of people learned a lot over COVID, but this series is meant to teach us what to do with that information.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope you guys can join us on Tuesday nights.
Cool. Tuesday nights. I'll send out the Zoom link too. I'll send out an e-blast on Monday. And if you are subscribed, you'll get that information. So just in case you're not getting that blast. But I will send that, or you can email me and I'll give it to you. I would want to make another quick announcement, and that is that the band is wearing a Mike Brown t-shirt. Janet Brown, Mike's wife, and widow is put these shirts together. We had that memorial service for him several months back. He was our bass player. Y'all remember him so well. But they just came out, and Brad got them, and so we're kind of wearing them in honor of him as well today. So thanks to Janet. I think you're watching, Janet. Love you, and our hearts are with you as well. And so the band's wearing that in their honor. So this morning, I want us to think about this idea of where we find God. How do we encounter God? Where is it that we actually experience God? How is God? So, and in particular, how would you know? How would you recognize that? How do we recognize that? And the reason why I've entitled it, My Guess, because that's all it is. I'm just going to guess at that with you. All right? So, Ben, let's get started.
What a wonderful symbol. Now's the time when you can light your candle if you're at home, and we'll do that. And will you join with me? Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come yet again.
All right. At 1111 downtown, would you please stand and sing a song with us together? This is a good old solid 1111 tune that we wrote. Y'all ready?
It's also a great time to bring your offering down to the table.
Always forget. Verse 1, all together now, like this. There are no steps to this sacred dance, just the feel of your feet on the floor. Arms in the air, as free as your bird, and as simple as a wave on the shore. Voices you heard have no power here. Find a rhythm that fits how you live. Silence the critical voices inside us that strain our lives through a sin. All right. God of pleasure and wilderness, grant us the wisdom to dance with creation. God of wonder and bliss, give us love for the beauty of all our relations. As we stretch out our hands to the heavens so fair, let this dance be our prayer. Verse 2 now. We move in the mystery of all that we see. We dance for the wonder of being. We dance through the struggles to remind us how the truth is finally free. Yeah. God of pleasure and wilderness, grant us the wisdom to dance with creation. God of wonder and bliss, give us love for the beauty of all our relations. As we stretch out our hands to the heavens so fair, let this dance be our prayer. Kevin? Verse 3. Come dance with your brothers and leave all your cares. Come sisters and mothers and let down your hair. Come stars of the morning and darkness of night, for the joy of creation's God's greatest delight. God of pleasure and wilderness, grant us the wisdom to dance with creation. God of wonder and bliss, give us love for the beauty of all our relations. As we stretch out our hands to the heavens so fair, God of pleasure and wilderness, grant us the wisdom to dance with creation. God of wonder and bliss, give us love for the beauty of all our relations. As we stretch out our hands to the heavens so fair, let this dance be our prayer. Y'all make me so happy watching you from up here. It's fantastic. That was so incredible. Oh my gosh. Would y'all take a moment and waltz around the room and find someone to greet this morning, would you please? Felix in the back is doing it. He's all dapper and cool.
All right. I invite everybody to take a seat, please. So good to see you all greeting each other and saying it's so good to see visitors. Welcome in here. I failed to mention also, if you're visiting with us, also grab one of our astonishment journals on your way out and maybe one of the mugs that I had up here, one of our tumblers. If you don't have that, we'd love to have you have something to remember us by. I'm so glad that you're visiting with us. I've asked her from time to time to write some stuff that fits with the theme, because as you know, Kagan's been, I don't know if you noticed this, but every time she's got something, it's always pretty amazing. And she's been doing a lot of poetry lately, as well as her finalizing her studies. By the way, Kagan graduates next Sunday. Yeah. So that'll be in Houston, but there'll be a celebration happening here locally at the end of the month. And we're all welcome to come out there. We're all literally welcome. Daryl, I hope you're watching. We're all literally welcome to come out to your house
all welcome,
on
yeah.
Sunday. So be prepared. So I asked her if she would read something as our Kairos moment, that time that we find between what's going to happen, what's been happening, but this time to be present right now. And she'll give us something to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I invite you all to relax. Come in contact with your breath, in contact with the seat that is carrying you through this moment. And I'd like to share with you. If you and I stood back to back and closed our precious eyes, if you and I breathed slowly, deeply, in sync, could you tell your breath from mine? If we calmed the noise and listened, would our hearts beat in perfect time? If you would be willing, I'd like to press your back to mine. I'd like to know what kind of questions would naturally arise in a moment where we both put our lives aside and focus on the feeling of your heart beating next to mine. I am sure, I am so certain, a connection we would find, a thread of sweet humanity wrapping us in life so intertwined. I hate to stop you as you go about your busy day, but the thread between us pulls me, compelling me to say that I can see you. In our breath, we are here, in moments where our sameness seemed to melt away the fear, shining light on the wonder, making space for the chaos, feel it deep within our bones. As we both breathe slowly, creating life and growing old, I hope you see the circle, the journey we must take, the tying of moments in between, the golden thread of fate.
So I invite you to just close your eyes, and if you'll take a deep inhale, a slow, long inhale, and then a slow exhale. And I invite you to do that 3 times with just the silence and the sound of the bowl. Holy One, we are gathered back to back, face to face, side by side, at distances or in close proximity. We give one another our breath without even thinking. We take from one another our breath without even thinking. Empower us to have a sense of equanimity and peace, and especially grace, as we strive to learn from one another. Amen.
We've got a little song we want y'all to sing with us as we continue our Kairos time. Hey, but first, if everyone would look behind you, that fella running the camera back there with the red and black shirt, that's Jack Gwynn. He turns 18 today. Yeah. I promised him I would not sing happy birthday to him today, so here goes. Nailed it. Sing with us. If I were to pray, if I were to pray, in the breaking of the morning, or the dying of the day, what would I say? What would I say? What would my heart speak if I were to pray? And if I were to sing, if I were to sing, if my soul could give some honest offering, what would I bring? What would I bring? What are the simple truths my soul would want to sing? And if I do, will not the earth beneath, will not the sacred life and all creation turn to lend an ear? Will not my song throughout the cosmos ring and swim that crystal river that flows through everything? Sing again. And if I were to pray, if I were to pray, in the breaking of the morning or the dying of the day, what would I say? What would I say? What would my heart speak if I were to pray?
So if you did, by any chance, copy down the bulletin on your phone, you realize we moved out of order. So somehow we got a little bit out of order, so that's all right, though. I'm going to invite you all to read this first text with me. We're going to read, I got two texts, one from the Psalm 23, a very familiar one, so I thought maybe it'd be nice for all of us to read it together, and I think probably it's the same one that I have here, so hopefully it's the same text. So let's join together at Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of darkness, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemy. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. A beautiful passage. All right, and then I'm just going to read this one that comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 10, and I'm reading from the Message version. They were celebrating Hanukkah just then in Jerusalem. It was winter. Hard to imagine winter right now. It was winter, and Jesus was strolling in the temple across Solomon's porch. The Jews circling him said, "How long are you going to keep us guessing? If you're the Messiah, tell us straight out." Jesus answered, "I told you, but you don't believe. Everything I have done has been authorized by my Father, actions that speak louder than words. You don't believe because you're not my sheep. My sheep recognize my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them real eternal life. They are protected from the destroyer for good. No one can steal them from out of my hand. The Father who put them under my care is so much greater than the destroyer and thief. No one could ever get them away from him. And I and the Father are one heart and mind." Now, I want to share with you, first of all, before I begin talking about how we recognize God, my best guess at the moment, I want to share that kind of what I've been doing for the last 8 years, because whether or not you all realize this, I've been with you all now 8 years last week. Did you know that? Yeah, that was... The applause should be for you for putting up that long. I mean, that's... But I didn't realize this. I've been with you guys for 8 years. And really, the whole thing I've been trying to do is a couple of quick things, just a couple of things the whole time. First of all, is to give us space for thinking openly about what we understand. A lot of folks have come to this community with difficult or painful experiences in previous church experiences, or with a lot of doubts or a lot of questions, or people who've just left church no longer resonates, and now they've found a way in which church can actually resonate, in which spirituality and faith can actually resonate in a different way. So there's that, just creating a space of openness and inclusion for all people, regardless of your orientation, regardless of your belief system, regardless of who you love, regardless if you're young or old or wealthy or poor, just anybody. This is an open space for dialogue, for thinking. Granted, I do a lot of the talking here, but I'm going to try to change that in the next few months as we move into some different ways of doing this community now. But one of the things I want to do is have some time for us to actually talk about what I'm talking about. But the second thing I'm trying to do is very simple, because I keep drilling it in there, and I know for a lot of you it sounds like this is weird stuff he's talking about. It doesn't sound like traditional theology, because it isn't. It's a reframing. It's a way to think otherwise. It's a systematic way to think about faith. But it's an alternative way. It's not a it's not a contradictory way. It's not a way that denies the other way. It is literally a reframing, a systematic way to reframe. That's all I've been offering all these years. So when I'm talking about today, what do we think God is? Who do we think God is? What might God be? How do we recognize God? How do you hear God and recognize God? And are you asking that question? We're really just talking about reframing how we think about our faith or our spirituality or what it might be. So you could actually be a complete atheist, or think you're an atheist, or just don't know what you actually believe. You still have an opportunity here to rethink and reframe how you encounter life. That's really what I'm doing here. So, the question I would ask then, do you experience God? How do you experience God? Where do you experience God? And how often do you ask that question in your average day? Because the answer to that latter question essentially will be a step towards answering the first question, right? Are we even asking the question? Now, that first passage that I read is so familiar to us. It's both powerfully meaningful because it carries a visceral ritual meaning to us. We hear that at funerals. We hear that at special times and difficult times, at challenging times. We recognize that as sort of a comforting passage. So many of us know it almost by heart, just like the Lord's Prayer. So in a sense, it carries a certain meaning for us that we never think about. But I want us to think about it as something very present and real, not as though we are asking God to be in the presence of us when we are facing some difficulty or some great trial, but in fact that every single moment is a banquet, that every single moment is an encounter with the sacred. So the reason why this one came to me too, I've shared this story before, some of you won't remember this at all, some of you never heard it, but when I was flying on a trip to Michigan, one of my first trips to Michigan years ago, and I was going to a camp that I work with. It's one of the medical camps that I was working with back in the day, and that Brad now does. And it was a cancer camp for kids with cancer. And I was on this plane, and it was packed. We was heading up to Chicago, and then I was going to drive up to northern Michigan. And it was just packed. And I could tell it was a summer trip because there were youth there, and they were clearly with a youth director on a youth missional trip, or some kind of educational trip for the summer. And then there were a group of nuns, and they were wearing their habits and outfits, and they had their beads, on their hands, and there was probably about 6 or 7, maybe 8 of them in a group, and I thought, well, they must be heading towards some kind of event or missional thing. And so there was just a packed airplane, and I thought, well, I'm heading towards a missional kind of event as well, doing music and story with kids, facing some difficult times. And so it felt right, in a sense, almost kind of a destiny to it, if you will, maybe. But as we got about an hour into the trip, we hit turbulence. Now, I've been flying for years at that point. Turbulence is pretty common if you travel often, But this was pretty crazy turbulence. I mean, this was that kind of turbulence where you're hitting air pockets and you're dropping 1,000 feet, and then you're picking back up with the heat and you're rising up 1,000 feet. And things are rattling, and pretty soon you can see people looking at each other very anxiously. And the woman who had been talking to me next to me, a woman who was about the same age as me, and who happened to know that I was an ordained minister because I opened my mouth. And so when it started dropping like that, she looked over at me and asked, "Are we going to be okay?" Like I have the answer. And what I didn't realize until it got more and more apparent was that she'd been holding my hand the whole time until I could feel the pain from the scrunching. She was just squeezing my hand and saying again, "Are we going to be okay? Are we going to be okay?" And I said, "I'm sure we're going to be fine. These planes are designed to take this kind of stuff." And then suddenly the plane, as I said that, did this massive drop. And I kid you not, the masks dropped down, the compartments opened up, a piece of luggage fell out, there were 2 or 3 screams, the nuns were rubbing their beads together, and she looked at me and she said, "Pray the 23rd Psalm with me." And at that moment, part of me, the more logical, authentic part of me was about to say, let's have a conversation over theodicy and the nature of God and evil. And if God really does prevent evil in the world, while there were millions of people that were killed during World War II, God's going to spare this plane. That was what was going on in my mind. Really, let's be logical about this. But her eyes said the 23rd Psalm. And I suddenly just held my tongue. And I said, "Sure." And so I recited it, hoping that she knew it better than I did. And we did it together. And it was slow, and we said it, and you could hear other people praying. And I kid you not, it was scary. But I know probabilities. I know the reality of this, of what was likely to happen. And I certainly didn't think God was going to cause one thing or another. At least that was what I was thinking. And then when we finished the 23rd Psalm and things kind of settled after about another 10 minutes or so, and she was just gripping my hand like a vice grip. And then when it finally settled, we kind of started to cruise again. And the flight attendants came through and making sure everybody was okay. And she just looked at me. She had tears in her eyes, and she said, thank you, it worked. No. It did. It did work. It did just what it needed to do. You see what I'm saying? I didn't get that. I didn't get that until she looked at me and said that. And I suddenly realized sometimes, where is God? Right? Where is God? My sheep know where I am. My sheep know how to find me. They hear my voice. I hear their voice. It wasn't about the miracle of saving the plane. It was about the miracle of finding an opportunity to connect and diving into that opportunity to connect. Regardless of what we define it as meaning, something else happened. How often do we find ourselves in these places where we're encountering somebody opposite us, different opinion of us? They're going to come in and they've got this agenda, or they've got this way of thinking about things so different from our own, or they're different from us in so many ways, and we think it's about our agenda, and all it's really about is connection. My sheep know how to hear me. It's about this connection. They hear, they follow, they connect. A disciple approached her teacher and she said, will you please help me find God? And the monk said, I can't help you with that. And then she said, why not? And the monk said, for the same reason that nobody can help a fish see the ocean. Do you get that? Where is God? How do we encounter God? What in the world is God? And it's a little bit arrogant, I really admit. There's a bit of arrogance that comes in someone saying, this is who God is, this is exactly what God is, this is how I know this is what God is, and this is what God tells me to do. You got to figure there's a little bit of arrogance in that kind of a statement. Not that you don't own how you feel about God, but sometimes we presume everyone else sees the same thing. And the challenge for us then is to encounter those folks, much less try to encounter ourselves in those moments, and practice more what I would call that sacred presence, that gracious spaciousness, that relaxing instead of reacting that I talked about with the rising. I want to show this next. Let's see what the slide is. I haven't been asking you to go with the slide. Oh, this is good. So Dan Siegel is this guy who is a neuroscientist. And he's been working with mindfulness for years and years and years. And he's done a lot of neuroscientific studies. Well, he had a book out that came out not too long ago. And in it, he gives this great example because he says he recently discovered through some different scientific discoveries and other scientists' research that the brain may look like it's contained inside the skull, but it's not. There's actually interactive stuff that's going on outside of the brain. You might even think of it as mirroring behavior and mirroring neurons outside the brain, but he said it's a little bit hard to pinpoint, but you can definitely see it in scientific studies. And then he says the best way to explain this. Now, I'm not going to get too scientific or too, what's the word?
Metaphysical?
No, just the opposite. I'm not going to try to get too empirical about it, right? Too positivist about it, which means you're going to prove me wrong because science doesn't show this materialistically. I'm not going to go there with you. What I want you to think about are the moments where you discover something you didn't expect to discover in an encounter with somebody. Where the moment you have a sense that, you call it a premonition, I'm not saying it's metaphysical, I'm just saying we know these things happen. All I'm trying to get you to do is think metaphorically outside your concrete, empirical mindset, right? Get outside that positivist mindset and start thinking in terms of metaphor. Because there's a lot we don't know, which is fine. So he says, here's an example. Tell me what you hear when you listen to the sound of the seashell. Do you hear the sound of the sea? Do you hear the sound of the sand? Tell me, where does the shore begin? Does it begin where the sand ends and the water begins? Tell me where that is. Because if you think about it, we're just one great landmass with a lot of one great water mass on top of it. But we don't think in those terms. We think in very concrete terms. Well, here's the shoreline. There's the water. Maybe sometimes the tide rises. But no, the shore just keeps on going. The water keeps on coming. It's a very ambiguous connection. Maybe that's the way in which we are to be present to one another, with this way of opening up to what we don't know. I thought I would ask you all to take a look around this room real quickly. Just look around this room. And I would ask you to guess what the dimensions of this room are. Right? Just look around this room. Just kind of take a quick look. Guess what the dimension of this room is? I want you to give me the answer to the question, what are the dimensions of this room? Someone want to give me an answer? 1,800 square feet. What? 60 by 40 by 30. Anybody else? All the answers are wrong. You know what the correct answer is? I don't know. You see what I'm saying? I don't know. When somebody comes up to you and they're just sure they know, you automatically want to jump back with what you know. Or maybe you're sure you want to jump in there because of what you know. But the reality is, we don't know. There's a lot we simply don't know. So that when you ask me, well, who is God and what is God and where do I experience God? Well, I could throw all sorts of definitions at you. The Old Testament has dozens and dozens of names for God. The New Testament has a lot of names for God too. But the reality is they all speak of one thing. When you get right down to it. Now, because you come with conditioning, because we come with conditioning, we're going to say we know just what Jesus meant when he said, I bring them eternal life, and they hear my voice, and my Father knows me, and I know the Father. And so we know ours, we know our sheep. And you're going to say, oh yeah, that's God out there, and that's Jesus the miracle worker, and that's those people who say they believe in Jesus as their Lord and Savior, and you're going to have all these concrete answers, because that's what we want. Certainty, concrete. But the truth is, we don't know. That's only what we've been taught. What do you see in Jesus in his life? Where do you see the magic happening with Jesus? Where do you see the healing or the miracles happening with Jesus? Every single time, it's in relationship. It's always in the encounters with others. It's always in that offer of love and grace that even Jesus was saying to those Pharisees and those who knew better, because they were schooled in right and wrong. They knew the law, and he says, well, sum it up. What's the law? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and thank you, some of you. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's it. That's it. Like Kagan was saying, what would it be to put our backs to one another in a way that we could begin to feel the heartbeats? Next slide here. Oh, I love this slide. This is Meister Eckhart. Do y'all know where this eyeball is? Seriously, you don't know where this eyeball is? How many of you seen this eyeball before? You guys got to go to Dallas. I was over there about a year or two ago, and I was walking around after Linda and I had a date that night, and she went on up to the hotel room, and I was just kind of walking out. It was probably 11 o'clock, and some guy was walking along the sidewalk, and he said, watch out! And I looked at him, and he said, watch out! And I said, what? And he said, and I looked around the corner, and there was this big eyeball staring at me. Watch out. Somebody has written on there, now you see us, I can't breathe. We know what that's about. Yes. Right, yeah. It wasn't there when I was there the last time. But this quote to me says it all, I think, in terms of how we try to understand how we experience God and where we find God's presence. Meister Eckhart, the 13th century Christian mystic, German theologian, said, "The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. And the eye, my eye, and God's eye are one eye, one seeing, one knowing, one love." This idea that to find God's presence is in this connection, is in this openness, this vulnerability, this willingness to be present to someone beyond the definitives, beyond the answers, but to find something else that's there in connection. That's where you find real transformation. Any one of you that's had that experience knows exactly what I'm talking about. Any one of you who resists those experiences because of disagreements, because of fear, because of anger, because of defensiveness, you also know what I'm talking about. You're not experiencing it. It's risky. It's vulnerable. Jesus died for it. It's a completely counterintuitive way of being in the world, which is to love one another as you would love yourself, which is to let go of our not just our inhibitions, but our definitions in order to be present to love. This is what Marilyn Robinson, who ran for president a few years ago, you might remember her. She said, "Love is holy because it's like grace. The worthiness of its object is never what matters. Love is holy because it's all about grace. The object is not what matters. It's about offering the space." So here's a quick thing, 2 quick last points here. The first one was I was trying to figure out, I've been dealing with folks. Right now we're in the midst of a lot of change in the world, oh my gosh, in the church, locally, new leadership, 11:11. A lot of change happening all throughout. If you've been part of the disciple church, you've heard that that's being discontinued. Not the breakfast, that will continue again in July, the morning breakfast for our neighbors in the community downtown. But there's a lot of change. There's a lot of angst out there. There's a lot of power grabbing and fear. How do we deal with that? And so I was kind of sharing this with the group this morning because there were some people that actually voiced, "I'm angry, I'm scared, I don't like what's happening." And I said, I heard the perfect example of what to do the other day. I said, I don't know if you've been driving around. When you drive around, you use your GPS. Most of y'all don't use your GPS. Some of you don't. Okay. If you use your GPS, which I use a lot, I hear this often because I don't listen to my GPS. But I hear rerouting. And then I'll look down, I went, geez, I missed the turn. So I'll try to catch up with it again, and then I missed it again because I'm overcompensating. And what does it say? It says rerouting. No matter how many times I disagree with it or how many times I defy it, it very patiently looks at me and says, rerouting. What if every time we find ourselves against one of those moments we just didn't plan on, but we just invite ourselves to reroute? Instead of react, reroute. Just invite ourselves to say, you know what? We're a part of something greater. I'm just not picking it up at the moment. I'll just let this reroute and see what happens next. I know it's against our instinct. But what if we just tried a little rerouting instead of shaming? A little rerouting instead of defensiveness. The journalist and author, African-American author Ta-Nehisi Coates, he said this once in an interview with Krista Tippett. And I want you to think about this in light of what Kagan wrote and also what we saw up there with the all-knowing eye. Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote this. He said, there is no immediate action I can do to get out of this crisis. And that crisis could be anything. He's speaking of racism, obviously, but it could be anything. It could be the LGBTQ divisiveness in our denomination. It could be what's going on with Roe versus Wade. It could be going on with any number of things. The person you're sitting next to on the bus or on a train or in a plane or that you're encountering on a sidewalk and they're tense. There is no immediate action I can do to get out of this crisis. What the realization is that you and I are trapped here together, that you're as trapped as I am. You're in the cage too. To get out requires not only turning toward one another instead of shaking the bars Or I'll add, instead of creating thicker bars even within that cage. What it requires is also a deep kind of imagining. And how do we imagine something that we've never known? That's where we find ourselves. And where is God in the midst of that? Well, the first place where God is to remind ourselves when we find ourselves in these definitive situations, we don't know. We're not sure. There may be something else here that can help us get past this impasse. Abraham Helsher said this. Come on up, Ben. I'll finish this with this last song. By the way, they're going to rock it out here, so get ready to get your energy up. Abraham Heschel, the Jewish philosopher, said this. He said, awe is a way of being in rapport with the mystery of all reality because, and that's what we've been talking about, is astonishment and awe, finding that and practicing that. It's important. It's an important way of being in the midst of the mystery of all of it because something sacred is at stake every moment. Now, if you can capture that, something sacred is at stake every single moment. If you can capture that, you'll begin to see life around you change. Amen.
Like a man said, you've had enough to drink today. Old pork hair and 50 bits of fare, serving for a place to stay. Sideways glance at a hidden romance, a chance to pass us all. Part of the game, headstrong, life-long theme song, living in a picture frame. Let's go outside, let's go outside, let's go outside our minds and play. Let's go outside. Let's go outside. Let's go outside our minds and play. A miracle dream, lean cuisine, a body that was built too fast. The old age home's a danger zone, just waiting to remember the past. Widows peak, crows squeak, the cow jumped over the moon. Fighting the days, rattle away, laughing the haze, it all just ends too soon. Looking ahead of a rosebush bed, trying to spell the clouds of a juicy group friendship, waiting to unzip what is all around. It's all for thought, what you bought, it's not what it seems. But the trade is paid, it's done and paid. You're playing for the team. And let's go outside, and let's go outside, let's go outside our minds and play. Let's go outside, let's go outside, let's go outside our minds and play. Let's go outside, let's go outside, let's go outside our minds and play. In all of your days, at some point to play in the game. A life screwed down tight, with your whole world inside. You see it black and white now. If your days are the same, some point you're to blame. Playing the game. A life screwed down tight, with your whole path inside. You see it black and white now. dance and play.
Wow. Yeah. I heard that song the other day on Spotify, and I said, I think that works. I think that fits. That was awesome. Nice job. Nice solo, yeah. Bass solo. You got a bass solo and a guitar solo. Hey, everybody, let's stand. Let's stand. It was so good to see you all this morning. So good to be together. I don't know what your plans are for the rest of this nice, warm day and week, but I hope it's blessed. And what I want to offer you is this benediction that we always end with, strange and yet making more and more sense as we go along. We don't say go in peace. We say go in pieces. Our lives, our time now has ended. Maybe some ideas have been upended and new ideas are being offered as our lives are being mended, but we go in pieces. And as we travel, we unravel, but we travel together. Because in pieces, we dispel the illusions, we help to mend the confusions, we discover new intrusions, and we find a better wholeness instead. So we go in pieces that we might find and connect with others in new ways and share this wonderful, beautiful creation. Amen.